Hello and namaste everyone. So it's been like 2 weeks now that I have been using the most hyped phone of 2022, the iPhone 14 Pro Max. If you don't know about me, it's been 2 years since I switched to the Apple ecosystem. My daily driver before using this phone had been the iPhone 13 Pro Max, and I use a MacBook as well. And after seeing all the cool and exciting stuff during this year's Apple event, like this new notch, the new camera hardware, and an even faster A16 Bionic chipset, I pre-ordered it right away. However, it is still being delayed. So I had to go to scalpers and pay 2,65,000 Nepali rupees to get this thing, which roughly converts to $2,000 in the US. Such scalping practice is not just present here in my location, but in most places like Dubai, Qatar, Hong Kong, and India as well. Since I'm a reviewer, I have to get them as quickly as possible, but I would suggest you wait a week or two when the prices get back to normal and the stocks are easily available. Regardless, I am really enjoying my time with my 14 Pro. The iPhone 13 Pro was almost a perfect phone. In fact, it's still better than most Android flagships of 2022. And with the 14 Pro, I think the gap is getting bigger and bigger. So I'm really hoping that the upcoming Pixel 7 Pro and the Galaxy S23 Ultra will bring some major upgrades. Otherwise, I think a lot of Android users will be tempted to switch to an iPhone more than ever. It's not just because of how good the new iPhones are, but in this part of the world, iPhones are also considered a status symbol, a bragging tool. I realized it even more since last week because after the launch of the new iPhone 14 series, at Gadget Byte, we have received a ton of calls and messages from iPhone 13 Pro users asking me about the availability of the 14 Pro. But let me just tell you that you won't find that many differences or huge improvements between these two phones for you to upgrade. Your iPhone 13 Pro is just fine. And even if you are an iPhone 12 Pro user, I think you should wait for next year's iPhone 15 series instead. But if you're someone using the iPhone 10 or iPhone 11 or an ancient one with a Touch ID, this is going to be a heck of an upgrade. Anyway, I was expecting some design changes this time around, but it looks and feels pretty much the same as last year, except for a slightly bigger camera lens and location of the power button. In terms of color options, there's this new deep purple variant, which I think a lot of people are going to end up getting because this is what visually separates the 13 Pro and 14 Pro from the rear. The gold and silver color options remain the same, but the black option is now much darker and is called Space Black instead of graphite. I would have liked it if Apple had also continued the Sierra Blue variant from the iPhone 13 Pro though. I have also never been a big fan of how heavy the Pro series of iPhones are. I understand Apple is using premium dense materials like stainless steel and glass back, which contributes to the overall weight here, but the 14 Pro Max feels a bit too bulky and heavy for someone like me with small hands. You will get used to it eventually though, but I hope Apple engineers find a way to make future iPhones a little more lightweight. Okay, over onto the front, I am loving this new notch, which Apple calls Dynamic Island. It is not a game changer by any means, but this little animation here when interacting with the phone is pretty dope. I know there are a lot of people complaining that it's just a gimmick and a marketing stunt, but after using it for a while, I think it's a really interesting quality of life improvement that needs to be appreciated. I like how it shows up charging or low battery message, or the fact that it has made interacting with Spotify and Apple Music a lot easier as well. But what's interesting to understand is that Dynamic Island will only get more fun and more productive once Apple opens up the door for third-party developers to make the most out of it. For instance, I use the LiveScore app a lot to stay updated with Premier League games, and they could add a feature into Dynamic Island to notify you as soon as a team scores a goal. That would be pretty cool. Now, about the core quality of the display itself, I've got to be honest, I did not notice that much of an improvement from the 13 Pro. The 14 Pro can get quite bright outdoors, so you will be able to properly use it on a bright sunny day, which was a slight struggle on last year's model. But under indoor condition, there is not much of a difference. Still, the iPhone 14 Pro has one of the best displays you can find on a smartphone. Even according to DxOMark and DisplayMate's lab test, this is the best display on a smartphone. It has great color uniformity, it processes HDR videos really well, and I haven't noticed even so much as a hint of stutter here. Plus, this is also the second gen iPhone to feature a 120Hz refresh rate. So all the issues we had on some apps running on 60Hz on the iPhone 13 Pro have been resolved here. And almost all the apps now run at a smooth 120Hz refresh rate. However, I can't say I like Apple's always-on display implementation. For me, Android phones still do it better. Right now, it just dims the brightness of the lock screen and that's it. Many people have also been complaining about its brightness being a little too high, so maybe Apple could add a custom slider to toggle the brightness of the always-on display. Plus, the widgets I can add on the always-on display screen are pretty limited as well. I would have also liked it if I could add widgets for Gmail, WhatsApp, and other useful apps here. And because the brightness of the always-on display is so high, I am also losing like 1% battery per hour. So I am disabling it for now. I think it's after such a long time that I have seen Apple bringing in such an unpolished feature to the public. Now, about the actual battery life, with the always-on display turned off, it's as good as the iPhone 13 Pro Max. I was, however, expecting it to be slightly better because this display can now dip as low as 1 Hz versus 10 Hz on the iPhone 13 Pro series. But I am absolutely not complaining. You see, most Android flagships can hardly make it through a day under heavy usage, but the 14 Pro Max always has like 30 to 35% charge left before I go to sleep. So this is the only high-end phone that lasts me for 1.5 days or even 2 days if I don't use mobile data. Charging speed, on the other hand, remains the same. This 20-watt wired Apple charger can take the phone from 0 to 80% in an hour, and then it starts fueling up really slowly to ensure strong battery health. As a result, it takes like an hour more to reach 100%. If you ask me, I think Apple is playing it too safe. It's not just the charging speed that affects the overall battery health, but factors like gaming and taking 4K videos for hours and how you charge your phone also makes a difference. So I would love to see Apple upgrade to 30-watt or even 65-watt fast charging next time. And I don't even want to get started with the Lightning port. I honestly was expecting Apple to bring a Type-C port with this year's iPhones, but we're still stuck with a super slow USB 2.0 Lightning connection. So say you're a videography enthusiast looking to copy a 50 GB ProRes video that you just shot. It's going to take a lot of time copying it on your desktop. However, what's improved here are the stereo speakers. They sound crisper and fuller with a wide soundstage. Okay, when it comes to performance, iPhones have been dominating the smartphone industry for over a decade now. The A15 Bionic from last year is already faster than current Android flagship chipsets. And with the new A16 Bionic on the iPhone 14 Pro series, that difference is getting even bigger. Apart from the numbers, Apple has also massively improved the display dimming issue we previously encountered with last year's models. So, the display on the iPhone 14 Pro Max does not dim itself even after 30 minutes of Genshin Impact gameplay or 4K recording. I reckon Apple has improved the thermal cooling design on the 14 Pro. So with this and the power of the A16 Bionic, the iPhone 14 Pro is easily the best gaming phone right now, as it can deliver the highest FPS and stable, sustained performance even in the most demanding games. Likewise, the A16 Bionic chipset is not just about pure performance. It also has the new Snapdragon X65 modem, which is both faster and produces less heat while you're on 5G data. It even has band N53 support, which allows the new emergency SOS feature via satellite to work. At launch, this feature is only available in a handful of regions like the US and Canada though. I'm also pretty surprised to see no Wi-Fi 6E support here, as the iPhone 14 series is still limited to Wi-Fi 6. Alright, let's talk cameras now. This time, Apple has significantly upgraded the camera hardware since we finally get a 48 megapixel primary lens on an iPhone, which is not just big in terms of megapixel count, but it's a 65% larger sensor than the iPhone 13 Pros. We also get a new 12 megapixel ultra wide angle lens, although the 3x telephoto zoom lens remains the same. I would have loved if there was a 10 times periscope lens as the Galaxy S22 Ultra, but seems like Apple is not interested in zoom photography yet. Over onto the front, Apple has finally introduced OIS and autofocus in its selfie camera. So these are actually great upgrades. And pairing that with the new ISP and DSP, I am getting better results from the iPhone 14 Pro compared to its predecessor. It's not that drastic, but you will find the 14 Pro's images to have better dynamic range, less contrast, and an overall pleasing look. This is not noticeable in all instances, but most of the time the photos from the 14 Pro look better with balanced colors. And if you want more details, you can enable the 48 megapixel mode and click raw images with stunning details. Similarly, I found the portraits to have even better bokeh and skin tone on this guy as well. Once again, it's not a huge difference, but you will definitely like the photos coming from the iPhone 14 Pro more. This 48 megapixel main camera also allows for 2x lossless zoom, and you can see from these images they are much better than the previous gen. The same goes for selfies, ultra wide, macro, and even 3x zoom shots. Traditionally, iPhone's photos used to be slightly contrasty with a warm hue, but this time around I feel like they've taken some inspiration from Pixel and Galaxy devices and turned it to be more likable. Apple also promises 2x improvement in low light conditions, but I did not find it to be that significant of an upgrade. Yeah, the 14 Pro does take better shots at night, sure, but it is not twice as better as Apple would have you believe. And I still think that when it comes to extremely low light conditions, Pixel and Samsung are doing a much better job with night mode. I am also a little sad to see there's no 8K recording yet, although the 48 megapixel camera is technically capable of shooting 8K videos. That being said, iPhones still remain the king in terms of videography, and I found the stabilization to be even better here thanks to the new Sensor Shift 2.0 technology. But more importantly, Apple has finally introduced a super steady mode called the Action mode, which is something we have seen on a lot of Android phones. Basically, it crops the video and delivers super smooth and incredibly steady videos, even if you're running. I am sure motovloggers will find this feature really useful. So for selfie videos, just like last time, you can shoot at up to 4K 60 FPS from the 14 Pro Max 2. This time you have OIS in the selfie camera of the 14 Pro Max, but I don't see any major differences when it comes to stabilization from both the phones. The only difference I see is in terms of background exposure management, which seems to be better on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, much better actually. Apart from that, the background noise cancellation is also better on the 14 Pro Max. So there you have it, guys. That was my 2 weeks experience with the all-new iPhone 14 Pro Max. With every generation, I am seeing Apple making their iPhones better and better. Of course, it's still not perfect by any means, but it's almost there. And that's kind of bad news for Android, because I feel like the gap between Android flagships and this year's iPhone 14 Pro models are bigger than ever. If you look at this graph, every year the sales of iPhones are on the rise, whereas the sales of flagship devices from Samsung and OnePlus are declining year by year. The reason why I think that's happening is because brands like Samsung are more focused on foldables these days, which is not a bad thing because I love foldables. I think that's where the smartphone industry is eventually headed, but it will take some time before we get there. In the meanwhile, Apple is absolutely nailing the smartphone industry by perfecting their iPhones every year. Thus, if you're looking for a banger of a phone and have got the money to spend, you should probably go and get this guy.